Good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're very excited to welcome Matt Crane here tonight to celebrate their new novel, A Sharp Endless Need. We are here also with Kevin Wilson, and what I have found is that they are both massive basketball fans, perhaps surprising about Mack. Mack is a former college basketball player and the author of the novel A Sharp Endless Need, as well as I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself, which was an Indie Next pick, a New York Times Editor's Choice, and a Lambda Literary Award winner. It was also a Charis Books staff pick and huge fan favorite at Charis. They have received fellowships from American Short Fiction, Sewanee Writers Conference, and Vermont Studio Center. Born in Allentown, Pennsylvania, they currently live in San Diego with their family. And Kevin Wilson is the author of 7 books, including Nothing to See Here, which was a New York Times bestseller and a Read with Jenna selection, and Run with the Hills, which was published in May and is still selling like hotcakes around the city and the world. He lives in Sewanee, Tennessee, with his wife, the poet Leanne Couch, and his sons. So we're really excited to have you both here. This book, A Sharp Endless Need, has been already, so you're kind of winding down your tour, Mac. So we're really excited that you're stopping by Charis virtually. This book has spoken to a lot of folks in our community, and it's already got a lot of love. So I think many people are already feeling it, but for folks who haven't gotten to read it yet, they're going to be in for a treat. So I want to let folks know they can ask questions at any time. You can put your questions in the chat, and I'll put them in the Q&A box, and Kevin will work them into the conversation. But I know many of you are just excited to hear Mac read and hear some great conversation. So I'm going to get out of the way, and thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks, ER.
Yeah, thank you, ER.
Fun fact, Kevin and I our books have the same birthday, our recent books.
That's right.
We're both birthday twins.
Well, Mac, I'm really glad to have this chance to talk. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about how we first got to know each other or why we might be doing this event together.
Yeah, we can, because it's fun, and it's also one of those things where it's like teaches people like reach out to your heroes, like send people fan mail. You never know what's going to happen. Well, yeah, I read Nothing to See Here, and I was like, holy shit, there's like a cool women's basketball storyline in this book. And like, yeah, it was like, you know what? I like to show authors when I really like dig their stuff, and I'm just going to reach out to Kevin, and you replied, and we just started talking about women's basketball. And I wore this jersey for Kevin. It's Candace Parker's Tennessee jersey. Yeah, we became like email pen pals, and then got to meet in person at Sewanee, shoot hoops with your kid.
Yeah. And I've got my Candace Parker t-shirt on. So we didn't talk about it, but who else are you gonna wear but Candace Parker? But yeah, I had heard of your work because someone was like, there's someone who played D1 basketball who writes, and that's that kind of thing where who is this unicorn of a person? And I really dug your poetry, and more than that, it was just cool to talk to someone that loved writing but also loved basketball, which a lot of times those are things you compartmentalize when you're around different people, because there's not many people that really want to talk about them and with the level, I think, of obsession that we did. So it was really cool, and I'm grateful for that friendship, because it then got me the opportunity to read A Sharp Endless Need before it came out, and it took my breath away. It was beautiful and brilliant and unflinching in ways that just kind of tore me up. So I think, Mac, if you don't mind, I wonder, just because we're going to start off this, and if you didn't mind reading something from the novel.
Yeah, let's do it. Also, thanks. You're making me blush over here with your compliments. Yeah, I'm just going to read the prologue of the book. It's very self-contained. It's called Pregame Pump Up. The book is in the structure of a basketball game. So like there's chapters that are like halftime, timeout, da da da. So this is like the pregame pump up. The people are like in the locker room in an abstract sense. We wanted legacy, Liv and I. We wanted our names in bright lights, our names in everyone's mouths, names people would remember. No, just on the tip of their tongues. No, let me get back to you. None of that shit. We wanted fans so loud, everything went quiet inside our heads. And for a while, we might have had them. We made canvases of our bodies. We sweat and we cried, rivulets flowing down face and chest and limb. We boasted bruises from hard-earned buckets, birthmarks we gave ourselves. We moved with animal instinct, smooth like panthers going in for the kill. We won loose balls, and when we didn't win them, we caused tie-up after tie-up, wet bodies coalescing on the wood floor, rip, rip, roar. When the game was on the line, and when it wasn't on the line, we sacrificed our bodies. Not because we were told to, but because there was no higher honor. We sacrificed our bodies for something not quite holy, not quite mortal. Where does the body end and immortality begin? We wanted to find out. On offense, our passes were so sharp they could cut through butter, handles so smooth we lulled our defenders to sleep with the rocking. On defense, we had magic hands, fly quick hands, hands tugging jerseys, hands pestering shorts, hands that swatted, hands no one could swat. Hips pressed against glutes, bodies that wouldn't budge an inch. We wanted to live forever. Who could blame us? We wanted to live ball in hand, ball against backboard, ball licking the bottom of the net. We wanted to be in history books. For what? We didn't know. We certainly weren't the first to do anything. Not to ball, not to win, not to lose, not to suffer. But that didn't matter. To us, basketball was a historical record of all the ways a body can move with and for another. What could be better than the strange and perverse pleasure of being known? If we couldn't live forever, we at least wanted pleasure in big, dripping buckets. More so, we wanted the knowledge that we were still capable of enjoying our own pleasure. The pleasure itself hadn't become yet another goal to work toward. Dizzy with fervor, we knew nothing of moderation, of balance. We wanted excess, more trash talking, more chest thumping, more bumping and grinding. We drove hard, we drew fouls. We stomped our feet and raised our fists in celebration. We wanted to make sure our opponents could feel us coming. We wanted their student sections to heckle us, tell us we were pieces of shit with no outside game, no heart, no skill. We liked the taunting. It gave us all the more reason to pin our hands behind our backs and raise our middle fingers when the refs weren't looking. We wanted speed, reckless speed, the white-hot heat of a fast break pecking at our heels, the court opening up before us like a parted sea. On the court, we were married. The referee whistles like wedding bells ringing inside our chests. Only we didn't call it a marriage. We called it shared language, tongue-heavy language, locked and loaded language, the most reliable form of communication. One bound not by syntax, but by rhythm, by the beat, beat, beat of human music, by the simultaneous seeing and knowing of another. The game bonded us in a way words could only dream of. And if we had an animal instinct, a panther prowl on the court, then basketball had a hound dog nose. It could sniff out and track our desires before those desires had even arisen in us. That's what we needed, what we counted on. Some people said basketball was like dancing. You needed rhythm. You needed to feel the ball's desire like you needed your heart to beat right. But we knew in the deeps of our hips that basketball was even more erotic than dancing. It was a collaboration, a mutual creation, a way of fucking without touching. But when we stepped off the court and headed to the locker room, when we ripped off our sticky with sweat jerseys, when we untied our laces, when we could no longer hear the bellows of the crowd, when already the game time focus had become a thing of the past, when already we forgot the heated glory of all eyes on us, the stomp of the fan feet, the clap of the fan hands, the echoing beat of the ball in a last play quiet. When we did all that, we stripped down to our raw pink skin and wet the game away, our eyes pinned shut under the rushing stream. We shower next to each other, alone together in a ritual, acutely aware of how space worked differently without the layers of jersey and shorts and crowd and competition between us. In the shower, we were exposed. In those moments, we greeted each other as if meeting for the first time. Hey, we said. What's up? We said. We risked glances at each other, then we shied away. But we always looked back. When we stepped off the court and took off those jerseys with names and numbers and histories, we wanted anonymity. We wanted a temporary refuge where we could be unknown, anonymous to everyone but each other. I always take some breath out of me when I try to read it.
It's so good. It's just like the perfect way to start this novel, and I've never actually heard you read it, but just that we is just so hypnotic and intoxicating, and the way it leads us into this story is really beautiful, and I'm grateful to you for reading it. You when you said, "Are you down to do, a book talk?" I kind of wrote you after, and I was like, "Do you mind like horribly generic questions for the discussion?" And you were like, "Yeah, bring it on." So I feel like we'll get into the minute detail later, but I just wanted to start because I just think it's something that I honestly would love to know more about, which is just the inspiration for this novel. Like when you started to think about writing it, but also like how it may have changed over the course of writing it, because I know there are elements of the story that connect to your own personal experiences, your love of basketball, having played it in high school. But when did you start to think about this would be a novel?
So I famously have a terrible memory, you know, as just part of my life and part of having had babies, in the past few years. But like the first thing I had to do was give myself permission to write this story, which was like a huge obstacle. That's what was my entire life for 22 years, basically. And uh, I was like, oh, that's not worthy of like literary exploration, or the lit world sort of has their like really problematic views of like sports are lowbrow, or they're not, like an adequate space to explore like really big human questions. So it was like I had to get over all that like internalized shit to even be like, okay, like this thing that I went through and a thing that's really important to me could even be a novel. So it was like I had to live a while for that to even be like, all right, that's a possibility. But I do know that I wrote the first draft of it on parental leave, which feels wild. So it was like 2021. And I can remember watching like March Madness and like sitting with my baby and being like, Mack and Liv, whatever. But it changed a lot because it was a dual POV at that point. Like I had Mack and Liv alternating chapters. And something that I didn't remember until the other day is that I wrote this story in like every other vehicle before a novel. Like I wrote a screenplay first. I wrote like a short story, and then I wrote like a novella that was sort of structured similarly to like Brokeback Mountain novella, which is also like that sort of dual POV, like third person. So I wrote it like a million ways before I was like, oh, maybe it's a novel, which in a lot of ways feels like a waste of time, but also feels enriching. So yeah, at one point I ended up dropping like Liv's point of view and shifting it back to like first person and focusing on Mack. And there's not a good craft reason except for the fact that I'm maybe not a third person POV writer, and that's something that I need to come to grips with. I'm a solid first person writer.
All right. Well, I'll cross off the why did you drop the Liv Cooper answer. I mean, and just kind of quickly for people that haven't read it, so Mack Morris, basketball player, high school, loses their father, and Liv Cooper, a basketball player from another team, has transferred, and they're now on the same team. And what we watch over the course of that year is their relationship, the complexity of that, but also the complexity of Mack trying to come to terms with their own identity, their familial situation, but also their future, right? And so it's interesting that you I never saw all those other versions, and while I really love the idea of that dual perspective, the voice of Mack is so strong and carries this novel in such incredible ways that it's hard to imagine Mack giving up space in the book for someone else. So
that was maybe the problem. Is
Yeah.
Mack give me my stage.
Oh, I love it. Well, so now we can kind of move into maybe some more specific stuff. And so many of my own novels are set in the 90s or early 2000s. It's just it's my wheelhouse, and it's comfortable for me. I love that time period. It's easy for me to remember it. And so I was immediately on board. I wanted to know kind of why, both personally and structurally, you wanted to set the novel in, I think it's 2004, right? The early 2000s. Why did you decide to center it then?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious answer is similar to you. That's when I grew up. Mack is a little bit older than me because I was 14 in 2004. But it's when I grew up. I don't know what it's like to grow up now, or at least I couldn't write it in a really authentic and I think brutally honest way. The ins and outs of these things. It's I witness on TikTok, or I talk to parents who have older kids, and it's obviously the world is so different now, and I would feel like I can't really capture the complexities of that, but it's I can capture what it felt like to grow up in the early aughts. But I have some of the silliest reasons for it being 2004. I just well, it was I needed Allen Iverson to hit this game winner. I just really wanted it to be historically accurate of this game, this buzzer beater that he hit. I was Googling old games. I was it just needs to be right. I don't want to make up Allen Iverson's life, which was sort of silly. But there was also sort of broader reason. So Cheryl Swoops is the first WNBA player to come out, and that was in 2005. And that sort of rocked things a little bit. So having it in 2004 also gave me this moment of Mack and Liv don't know a single out. Personally in their hometown, they don't know anyone out, but there's not even a WNBA or basketball role model to look towards either, which is, one of the other things. If I was to write coming of age now, it's you're looking at Paige Beckers, and you're looking, Diana Taurasi, all of these out people who are young kids have to look up to, and placing it in 2004 specifically, they didn't even have a single person to sort of look toward or know that this is a possibility.
I don't want to say it for you, but I feel a lot of times I really love talking.
Say whatever for me. Go for
I
it.
love talking to artists about their process, because one of the things that's so reassuring is it's so hard to write these difficult things that I think a lot of times the choices that you make sometimes are just what makes it easy enough for me to do the stuff that's really hard. So if I know this time period, let me just have that time period, because this other stuff is going to require so much heavy lifting. That a lot of times you're just finding the easiest way into that stuff. And if you know the time and it's locked in and it gives you these things, it's great. And I did want to say, I think I told you this, but I love that it's set in the early 2000s, but it also is just kind of essentially to me kind of timeless in the emotions of it. And so it feels timeless, and yet it is so specifically rooted in that time period and using those details. So you're getting both out of that. And I think one of the things I had wondered, I think especially because we're seeing that boom in women's basketball, especially for the WNBA, is just like how different would a contemporary setting have made this novel, you know?
Yeah.
It's unbelievably different.
Yeah. Is this a question or are we just chatting?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a question. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's also just like, yeah, everything's different. I mean, just the way that WNBA players and college women's players are like on social media. They're so readily available to us, and that's for any celebrity, right? We're sort of closing that distance between like those parasocial relationships. We feel like we really know these people because we have that sort of access to them. Like the stud buds are two studs in the WNBA who have like a chat like stream that they do. People are tapped into these things, and you get to like see them as real people, and that's really special. And also, I have no idea what that would be like to have witnessed that as a 16-year-old and be like, oh, holy shit, like this is a future for me. Like I see a path and it looks really clear. And I have these people to thank for it. Without that sort of vision into a future, it was like, and I think I have Mack sort of talk about this a little bit, like my future just looks a little bit blank. Unless there's basketball there, but otherwise like it's very murky. I can't like place myself there.
And I was thinking about this too, because you know this way, way better than I would, but it also just feels like the level of scouting and the kind of public nature of high school for recruiters and for colleges is so much more intense that even that feels like a huge difference in the way that players are kind of viewed and how quickly they're known through AAU and all that stuff.
Totally. And then it's like the commodification of these people too, right? Like the ability to like turn somebody into a product like extremely quickly when they're still a minor, so yeah, that's wild. I thought it was wild to me. What I put in the book was like the Penn Live,
Yeah.
for anybody out there who doesn't know what that is, which is probably all of you. Like it was just a very strange early social media like forum where people would go talk about Pennsylvania high school sports. And you could sort by like valley or town or whatever, but like there were just like grown adults on there with like anonymous usernames, like talking shit on 15-year-old girls, which was like so bizarre. But it was my very first experience that I compared to going on Goodreads. I would like go on there and be like, what are these old men saying about me? And they'd always be like, talking shit. Crane's not that good or whatever. And then I get that same impulse. What is Goodreads? What's happening? Crane's not that good. All right, we're consistent.
Oh man, do you go on Goodreads?
Yeah, man.
Oh God, holy moly!
We don't have time for all that. You have to unpack that.
So, well, now that leads me into another question. Is just you've got the time period, right? 2004, but it's also Pennsylvania, and I guess just choosing that landscape. I know that this is partly just again like personal experience, but how does that landscape influence the story for you?
Yeah, obviously, again, where I grew up, it's like at this time period, like 2004, like it's a conservative place, but it's also like I feel like so many of the queer spaces were just those like places that felt like Disneyland. Like you hear about San Francisco, right? You hear about New York, and those are like the two places that you sort of hear about, like, oh, these are queer like safe havens, and like this is where people want to like escape, like the small town escape fantasy. But like it was like I didn't know anything about any of that. It was just like I was actually thinking the other day, like there's the cliche, but like understandably, of the novel of the queer person escaping the small town to the big city, and then shit ensues. Mine feels like it's leaning into that trope, except it's like trying to escape through basketball, right? But so it's like, where do I go? How can my escape, the small town escape, be like through the lens of this thing that I can like do? But yeah, I mean, it was fun to like pretend I was in Pennsylvania again. Like I was just like, do teens just stand outside a gas station and like drink and smoke cigarettes and light things on fire anymore? Like I don't think they do, but I'm gonna travel back to that space real quick when I'm writing this. I'm like a big, I mean, you are too. Like you love nostalgia, I feel like big nostalgia core person. So it was like, yeah, I don't know. It was also like my growing up felt really fraught in a lot of ways and like not like I put it easy on Mac. Like Mac has a really hard time, but it was helpful to just sort of like relive it through a different person, sort of different, different, same person.
So, in terms of going back to that time and to that place, that kind of nostalgia, I mean, is that part of the pleasure of writing sometimes for you? Like to be able to go back into those spaces with like some kind of perspective that lets you write your way forward?
I think so because it would have been such a different novel if it was like in present tense or something. Um, but having my perspective and writing it from a sort of understood like 10, 20 years in the future Mac, um, yeah, everything just has a different lens like when you're revisiting those spaces because when I was living it, like I felt so claustrophobic, um, like so depressed and closeted and like traumatized all the time. Um, and it was like I was just like clenched fists all the time. So like returning to it in my head, um, yeah, it's like this breathing room, and even if it's a hard space to return to, like it still feels like I don't want to say healing in a way, but like yeah, it just provides some perspective.
I think there's a lot of talk about nostalgia as this kind of dangerous thing, you know? And I
Yeah.
agree with that. But sometimes for me, like writing and going back to those times and places, it's not that I want to live in that time and place again. It's the charge that I feel sometimes because it's like growing up in this tiny confined town, you go back in that in your mind and then suddenly you feel the spark that you were that person for just a brief moment. You were like, I still feel a connection to that person even though I feel so different now or so much time has passed. And for me, that's the charge of nostalgia, are just
Mhm.
those reminders of that is me, that is a part of who I am. And I think that's why I like going back because the charge keeps sparking. The older you get, the more you do it, you feel it. And I don't know, even though I didn't live in Pennsylvania and I didn't grow up in 2004, I could feel that charge of someone else's life as they look back on it, that I just am fully in on that when I read it.
I appreciate that. I do want to throw out there that somebody had labeled this book historical fiction, so that needs
Yeah.
to be on the record. You need to make it known.
I have to do that every time one of my students in workshop writes a story and they're like, this person was old, they were 39. And I'm like, I don't want to spend 10 minutes of workshop explaining like why that's actually super young and like so much life ahead of them. But I just have to let go of it, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, they were near death.
So can I ask you a little bit? Because I mean, God, I wish I could see more, novels about basketball, but also just I don't know. I love coming of age novels, and especially ones that are kind of looking at the spectrum of identity and sexuality. And I just wanted to know if, and I don't mean like you don't have to go too deep into this, but did you encounter resistance from like publishers about the fact that it's a queer coming of age novel that kind of heavily features basketball?
To be honest, like no, at least not much that I can remember. All the resistance that I got was, or mostly was when I wrote like a failed memoir before it failed. It didn't sell, but it was like had so many of the same themes. It was about what it means to identify as a basketball player and all of the things that you attach to the things that you love. Um, gives you community, gives you a feeling of self-worth, gives you, whatever, all of those things that sort of circle the thing. Like, is it about basketball or is it actually about all the things that basketball gives me? Um, and all the editors were sort of just like, what are we supposed to do with this? I think they were like, if you're not a celebrity, if you're not Sue Bird writing a memoir, why do we want this mediocre Drexel basketball player's memoir?
Uh,
No, so that was where really people were like, we don't have any idea what this is. But the second I sort of repurposed some of that stuff and worked it into Mack's story and the novel, like there really wasn't any resistance. Like I think editors were like, we see the heart of it is XYZ, and like basketball is sort of the setting that we use to explore these questions of desire and obsession and ambition and grief. But it's more just like, here's the stage. The stage is basketball. We did have like my editor Katie. We did have conversations about like whether to like edit towards people who haven't read like seen basketball, like if they're not going to understand or it's going to alienate like the actual basketball writing. But I didn't really want to change any of that. I maybe changed like one word, but we had important conversations about like, this is who it's for. Like it's for queer basketball players first, and then anybody else if you want to hop on and enjoy it too. But that's who the audience was, and I didn't want to like sort of like dumb it down in terms of the basketball language. Like all of that is talking that language. That basketball is its own language. So that was really more of the discussions, was how much of this we want to be accessible.
So since it's come out, then have you gotten responses from like basketball players, from people who are like, it's rare to see this, or that we really loved it, or the details of it feel like something that's connected to me?
Yeah, I've had a bunch of people be sort of like, I'm a lesbian basketball millennial. Like this was made for me. And, people who are like, checklist, this was written for me, which is awesome. I did like send it to a WNBA player, Sammy Whitcomb, who's on Phoenix Mercury. For some reason, she follows me on Instagram. Like I followed her, but then she followed me back, and I was like, what's up? You want my book? And she was like, oh, I'm gonna suggest that our team read it for like our book club. So that was cool. But yeah, it's also surprising how many people tag me and stuff or message me and they're like, I'm not a sport girly, but like I loved this so much, or like now I'm a basketball fan or whatever. So it's nice that it's still reaching those people who wouldn't normally sort of turn towards a sport or turn it on or appreciate it or think about it even in that way.
That's awesome. I saw, I think I texted you, the New York Liberty have a book club.
Yeah.
And I was like, you got to get in on that. You got book in their hands.
Yeah.
Well, so right after that opening section, we move into the novel, and it's a memory of Mack and their father, but also Allen Iverson features into this book. I guess I had a couple of questions, which is like, is Allen Iverson your favorite NBA player? And if the answer is yes, are there any other like foundational players that meant something to you? Like not just as a player, but also as a fan?
Yeah. I mean, he's my favorite of all time. I also like stopped watching the NBA so long ago, so it's never going to change. Like it's always going to be Allen Iverson. But it's like what we're talking about with like the nostalgia and the charge is like Allen Iverson holds, meaning for me as far as like watching with my dad and watching with my brother and like going to games and watching this super cool guy who didn't give a shit what anyone thought and did his own thing and had an attitude and like was 5'10", like just this like fierce tiny guy who was like, I'll take on anyone. Like that was inspiring for me as also a fierce tiny guy. And like yeah, and there's just like love and like beauty sort of surrounding like thinking about watching him. But foundational players otherwise, like Cynthia Cooper was my favorite WNBA player when I was a kid. I had her jersey when I was like 8. and like, read her biography and was just like so into her. She was also like fierce and gutsy. I love those players, but God, I'm such a downer. I was like, oh, this is gonna be great, and then I just have like a terrible thing to say. But it's also is also maybe worth talking about. Like it came out years ago that Cynthia Cooper has been a super abusive college coach, like at all these different colleges that she's been at. And that's one of those things that like we have to grapple with as people, right? Like I admired this person so much. Do I know her? You know, I didn't know her as a person, but I admired this player that I saw as a kid, and it was very foundational for me. And navigating that heartbreak, right? Like of, you know, this person as a person is not good, it's not admirable, and has caused a lot of harm. And those things are so heartbreaking and weird to deal with, right? Like we do it in the writing world too. Like we love someone's book or all their books, and you know, and then it comes out that they're sort of like this horrible person, and we're constantly having those conversations of separating the art and the artist and da da da. And but yeah, it enters this basketball space and sports space and you know everywhere. But it's sort of weird to look back through those lenses then, you know.
That's what I guess I was going to ask is it difficult to do that, to separate after that person was so instrumental to you in some way?
Yeah, totally. And it's even like a worse burn because I act like it happened to me, but like as you know, she coached at UNC Wilmington when I played at Drexel, and they were in our conference. So I was like sort of starstruck. Like we played them, and I was like, "Oh my God, you know this star that I loved as a kid is coaching." And we went through like the handshake line after the game, and I sort of stopped her. It was just like, "Just so you know, like I had your jersey, like da da da." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna make me cry." And like we had this wonderful moment, and you know, and then all these players started coming forward, and I was like, fuck that woman, you know? Like, no, like, fuck her. And I'm so glad that like more people are coming forward, like players are coming forward about like their coaches being abusive and things like that. Like, it's so important. And we don't need to like dive down a mental health hole of like athletics, but it's like great and empowering that those people are doing that and like feel safe too. So
Yeah, I feel like I mean that was one of the next questions I was going to ask. If you flip it, like who are the foundational writers for you then?
man, foundational writers. I mean, you know, the writers of Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys.
No, man.
Page turners, man. You know, nowadays, like Justin Torres is one of my favorite authors. We the Animals and Blackouts are his books. It may not come as a surprise that the prologue and the epilogue of my book are like really inspired by We the Animals, and like his voice and cadence and rhythm of some of his chapters. For anybody who hasn't read it, it's the book is mostly in the first person plural, we from the perspective of three well, the youngest brother, but the we is this group of three brothers. But he writes so poetically and also so brutally, and I love studying his work. Like it's such a privilege. So like, yeah, the prologue and the epilogue are definitely like an homage to We the Animals and Justin Torres.
I teach the opening of We the Animals in my short story class, and you know it's hard not to see the way that you utilize that we, but I love in We the Animals too that the we, there's moments where it separates and becomes one. It becomes the I, and it's just kind of breathtaking when that happens. That collective voice shrinks down to one sometimes, and I thought that was what was so lovely about the opening of your novel too, is that it opens with that we, and then that voice, you know, really becomes I in some ways, and it's so beautiful. Did you, when you say, I didn't mean to move past the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. I mean, I love those, and I even read like Mildred Wirt, who wrote like the Nancy Drews, like I read Penny Nichols, this other like another girl detective that she wrote just because I loved those books so much. Like, why do you think those are foundational books for you?
I don't know. It was like, I think it was fun to read like teenagers who were like solving mysteries, right? To like be young but not be like, oh, this is like Sherlock Holmes, like an adult man, right? Like it felt fun for me as like maybe a middle schooler to be imagining myself, oh, I could do these things. And um yeah, it was just fun. And I was like, yeah, these young people are just doing whatever they want, and they're, screw the man, I'm going to go investigate this, even though this seems like a terrible idea. And like the Hardy Boys, I always wanted to be Joe Hardy. Like, I don't even know why. I was just like, he's the hot one, and I want to be the hot one, and I want to be the brothers solving mysteries.
Joe was so impulsive, though, and Frank was the steadier one. I was more into Frank.
Yeah.
I felt
Frank
like
is so your speed, like he's like controlled.
I knew that Joe would get me killed, and that Frank would keep me safe, right?
Yeah.
But I think I think one of the things you're talking about too is like I love those books, and part of it was the most wholesome way to watch young people touch danger. Like it was the like permission. It's like you can do these things as long as for the common good and to help people and to solve things. But really, all I cared about was like watching them like put on scuba suits and try to find somebody. So yeah, I'm kind of always love people that say those books. I just love them so much. I know I don't want to keep harping on it. I know that, well, anyone that has questions, I'm seeing a couple come up, and in a little while we'll move to them. But can I ask a little bit? I mean, I oftentimes struggle to talk about the book because I don't want there to be spoilers for people that haven't read it, although I don't think this is a book that can be spoiled. I think you could know anything, and it's just written so beautifully that you're just in it, but I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about the relationship between Mack and Liv, and just I think one of the things like that makes basketball so inherently like it's so important to the book is the levels of which their relationship operates, like on the court and off. And there's just kind of so many moments where we see a transposing of desire, where like the physicality on the court or that openness to each other on the court can stand in for something that's harder to say in private. I just kind of wanted to know like how you moved through that and how you were thinking about that relationship.
Thanks. You also you gave my whole answer for me. No. You're like, here's exactly how it's done. No, I appreciate that. I really do, because it's like one of my favorite things to like think and talk through as far as like this book and sort of like the greater sports like world and our attitudes. But yeah, I needed basketball, this thing that they're both in love with and share, to be that vehicle for desire, for all that they can't really say to each other, all that they can't really like do. It's a safe space to sort of enact those like small erotic moments, intimate moments, connections, chemistry. And it's so funny that the safe space is like in public. I'm so fascinated by our cultural attitudes towards letting like extreme gayness happen in sports, like in public. And we're like, yes, that's just two teammates celebrating. So it's like in private when they're all alone, like they don't have the ability, I don't want to say courage, but like the sort of the wherewithal, like they just can't find the words to say all that they need to say to each other. And then they step on this court and they have like this really special connection, and they have chemistry. And I think anyone who's watching can sort of like feel it, right? Like it's like, when you watch two players who just get each other. I said it the other day, we were watching the WNBA, and Alyssa Thomas and Dewana Bonner are married, and they're on the same team now. And the way that they play together is so special, and you can't get it anywhere else. Like they're just, Alyssa Thomas knows where Bonner's going to be at all times. She's throwing behind her head. She's doing whatever. And you're like, those people, like you can tell like they love each other off the court. They have a beautiful connection off the court, and it's elevating their game in a way that feels really like it's level of worship or something. But that's what I was trying to convey here was on those things they can't really say, but get to come out on the court in sort of like a socially acceptable way, right? And when we talk about like sports, especially men, there's all the memes of like men invented sports so they could touch each other. It's like, yeah, probably. But it's like you can spank each other, like you can chest bump, people kiss each other all over the face. People jump and wrap their legs around other people's waists. Like there's just so much touching in a way that feels really erotic. And it's like, context matters so much. Oh, they're just celebrating, or oh, they're just playing a sport, and you take these same sort of things and remove them from that context and put them somewhere else, and like those are two people in love, or those are two people having sex, or whatever the case may be. That like juxtaposition is so interesting to me. When I was on book tour, I kept asking people if they've seen Challengers. Have you seen Challengers?
No.
I feel like I knew the answer was going to be no. Boo.
Why did you think the answer was going to be no?
I don't know. I just feel like you don't watch a lot of movies. I just feel like you're always watching basketball, and then like that's it. But it's like, have you heard of it? It's like, so it's like like homoerotic tennis movie, but it's like when the guys are like 16 or 17, they win a doubles championship. And the one guy runs over the other and he leaps on him and he wraps his legs around him like in celebration. And then the standing guy falls over. So then they're like this on the ground, and they're like, it's like extremely sensual. And it's like just boys being boys, celebrating their tennis win. And it's like, if they were anywhere else, you'd be like, those are two men who are hooking up. So it's like, or want to hook up, or whatever the case may be. So like that tension is so interesting to me, like narratively, like what you can do with things like that. And I just thought of this the other day, like the fact of sort of putting eroticism on the stage, like between Mack and Liv, it's like turns them into exhibitionists a little bit, and it turns the audience like into voyeurs who don't like necessarily know what they're watching or like what they're peeking in on, but they've like unwittingly sort of been put into that position, and that's also really interesting.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's so great about your book, but also is that these are two characters who, even though there is a slight subversion when they're on the court, because they can express these things physically that they can't private, but it's also just like, how easy is it for any teenager to kind of have the clarity of identity, to know like how you're enacting these things? And I kind of love that moment when Mack is figuring out like, this is a possibility that allows me to do what I want to do. And I think you're right. Like I growing up, like, I mean, I still am to this day, but I just watched professional wrestling all the time. And it was just like muscle men. And I remember even when I was like 10, I was like, it feels like maybe I shouldn't be watching this, like, I was like, this is so clearly what it is,
Something's just a little weird.
Yeah, it was just my parents would be like, no, you can buy the pay-per-view. And I was like, cool. Great.
Oh, I forgot to say, I learned this information like a month ago. I have this friend here. He plays rugby. He is straight. He does this thing where if he's ever going to fight with somebody on the rugby pitch, like in the middle of a game, like he just kisses them on the lips to like diffuse the tension. And I was just like so thrilled to have this like little jewel of information that I could like, have. I was just like, what? And he's like, props to him for being like comfortable, but I just mean like this, the sport gives him that, that little permission. And then we were like, oh, there's probably guys on the other teams who always try to start fights with him, so they can go little kiss.
There's levels to everything. Yeah. I do want to make sure we have time for questions and stuff, but maybe I'll ask you just one more question, and then if I can see some, but if there aren't any other, we can vamp for a long time, and I have so many other things I want to talk about. But I mean,
People
this
be
gets me
so thrilled to hear about niche basketball things.
when you were like, yeah, I have like 50 questions about like the 90s UConn and UT rivalry. But no, when you clocked me for not watching Challengers, I was just like, couldn't find a more prudish writer than me. But that doesn't mean that I don't like to read it. And so, but yeah, like I think I'm the Nancy Drew of American literary fiction, which is the
Wholesome.
most wholesome. But I wanted to ask you, like, I do think in this book you're writing about, for me as a writer, two things that I'm always interested in watching how other writers do it because there's such a high degree of difficulty. And one of those is just the physicality of sports. Like, it's really hard to accurately represent on the page what the body does within the limits of the rules of the game and what the body is capable of, to make that clear in the narrative of a game. And I just felt so centered. And when you talked about like wanting it to be accessible to a reader who knows nothing about basketball, I feel like you're right that you write it to the people that know basketball, because that's when you actually feel how important it is. But also the way that you write about sex, which is also like, you know, when it's not done well, you notice it, right? You're like, oh, this is probably why I don't do it. But I just wanted to ask you about the way in which you're rendering these difficult things on the page. And is that comfortable or is it easy? Like, is that the thing that you kind of feel like, yes, I know how to do this?
Yeah, it's maybe like a cheat, like we talked about setting it in 2004 and you writing in the 90s. Like, it feels comfortable to me. Someone interviewed me and they actually like pointed out, they were like, your writing is really embodied. And is that from having been an athlete like your whole life, and almost like an athlete first, because that was like so much of how I thought about myself. And like, it raised like a good sort of question of like, my life was so focused on what can my body do for me, in this specific context, in this game. How can my body like serve me and be this like sort of tool towards this greater, like win the game, win the season, also like play my best, get recruited, like, you know, whatever these goals are, like how can my body like serve these goals? So it's so sort of a strange relationship to have with oneself, in that way. And that made me think that maybe it feels easy to sort of just be deeply embodied, like in writing. But I also got to say, like, I wouldn't have been able to write another sport, even if I played soccer in high school and I've played rugby, but what you're getting at, the level of importance, that makes it really easy for me to write the basketball scenes. And it's because it's like this balance of psychology, emotionality, and is the reader oriented in space? Like, what are the bodies doing and what's happening in the game? But it's like those three things are always have to be like working at the same time, or else I can feel that like the scene is off, or there's no reason to be telling you, walking you 3 pages through someone like running a play or like whatever. Like, there has to be something else going on. And it's sort of working those scales, that I find fun, like, and challenging. Why is this moment important? Why is Mack remembering this specific like fast break, from this specific game? What moment is it linked to? What emotion is it linked to? And what sort of like greater psychology is it linked to? Yeah, and that's what like makes it fun for me. And I always, sports and sex have the exact same, for me, like the same craft approach. Like, they are not really different at all. I teach a sex class and I often tell people that I think like sports and sex are the two arenas where like we can sort of drop the like personas or the facades, that we like put on throughout different parts of our lives. Like, oh, I have the parent persona, I have this friend group persona. Like, even we were talking about in the beginning, like, oh, I have to talk about writing with writers and like basketball with basketball fans. And then when we are like, can talk about writing and basketball, but it's like you bring different personas to different things of your life, right? And for me, like, no matter how much work I've done on myself, like by the age 35, like all right, let me like have coping skills, let me center myself, let me be like a more grounded, better version of myself. Sports will strip that shit away faster than you can imagine. And I am like back to whatever like unhealed, like rageful self. Like sports activate something and they strip away like all of this sort of like growth, for lack of a better word, right? And you know, sex is different, right? Like we have performances, like people can perform when they're having sex, of course, but I think there's so much potential in scene work of sex doing that same work, like stripping down whatever persona or performance you sort of had, and like what can we reveal, what character work can we like get at. So to me there's the same exact mechanism, just in different arenas.
Yeah, you're so good at, I mean, it's also, I think when you talk about like all the facades and how it comes, but it's also just like in both of those, in a perfect world, like if you're good at it, like how aware you are of the space that you take up and the other bodies next to you, right? Like how much you have to be hyper aware of what the other person is doing and how you can respond to that. And so that does make sense to me. I mean, it makes sense in terms of writing it. Well, I'm gonna ask. There's a lot of people that want to talk about. I keep my exoskeletons to myself, which is awesome. But I'm gonna start. I'll just go in order. The first question is just who in the NBA would either of you like to see writing fiction in the future? Do you have a?
I don't watch the NBA anymore.
Yeah, why don't you watch it? Like no, this is WNBA.
Oh, I thought it was NBA. Who do I want writing fiction? Oh my God. I want to see Sydney Colson write some fiction. I mean, she's hilarious and wild, but I want to see like, I think she could dream up like a romp of a book, like a super sort of zany sort of thing.
That's awesome. I think Alicia Gray or Courtney Williams, just because they're both funny and they have like a kind of unique voice that I think that they
Courtney Williams wrote fiction and be crazy.
I mean, Alicia Gray is so good at lines that I've repeated in my head for a really long time when she talks about stuff, you know? I think she has a really cool like dialect, like the way that she like uses language and how funny she is. And I don't know, she's Atlanta, so she's one of my favorite players, but it's so hard. I mean, also who I don't want to see anybody else doing fiction. I don't want any competition. You know what I mean?
We've already got way too much competition.
How in the world am I going to get any press if there's professional WNBA players winning the National Book Award? I'm screwed. You know what I mean? It's not like I can go play basketball. So I would prefer them to keep that to themselves. I also, there's so many foundational players for not just the WNBA, but for women's college basketball that I just love to read. You know, and I love reading sports biographies of basketball, but I'd love to see like what they could do in the fictional world. Can I just ask real quick, do you have a favorite fictional book about basketball?
No.
Really?
What fictional books are there's the crossover? I don't even really know many. Like Hoop Dreams comes to mind, but that's nonfiction. And then I read The Basketball Diaries like a million times by Jim Carroll when I was a kid, which is arguably fiction because we know that he went back and changed. Like
I was about to say, I think of that.
Highly edited his journals.
I used a quote from him in my yearbook from The Basketball Diaries.
Wait, what was it?
I don't remember. It was something dumb. It's like, it's just me and my own naked self and the stars looking down on me and it's beautiful. But I love The Basketball Diaries. But did you ever read Paul Beatty's The White Boy Shuffle?
No, you told me about it at Sewanee.
Makes me so happy. It's such an incredible, and it's a book about a basketball player who then goes to Boston University to do creative writing. It's a really weird satirical coming of age. But the one I'll just say it real quick was I read it when it came out. And then in 2000, Phil Jackson used to give books to his players that he thought could be helpful. And he gave Kobe White Boy Shuffle, and it angered Kobe to a level of such intensity that he kind of never forgave Phil Jackson for thinking this is a book that he would read. So it also makes me love it for that reason too.
Oh my God.
Um, can I ask you, this is a question, did anything change with your writing process between Sharp Endless Need and Exoskeletons?
Yeah, a lot, like just for practical like life reasons, but also I don't know if you feel this way, Kevin, but like I feel like every book like sort of needs something different, like needs a different process. So I don't think I like have a process anymore. That's sort of the thing that I'm coming to terms with, is that every book like demands something entirely different. I had to be a lot more patient with A Sharp Endless Need. I was like treating every chapter like it was its own sort of self-contained short story, but still like moved the entire novel forward. But I wanted them to feel like these sort of like small vignette stories that could stand alone. And I just spent like a few weeks between chapters, like brainstorming in my head, like sort of outlining, and also just being like, what does this chapter need? Like, what themes is it going to be tackling? Like, where are we in the book? How's it going to, I just spent a lot more time like in my head. And then I would be like, oh, okay, I think I know what's going to happen. And I would sit down and write the whole chapter in one sitting. And then I would like do it again. And I'm someone who like, I try to race through everything, and it's not healthy. So that like made me sort of sit back and like just be patient and sort of work through it.
I think somebody told me once, they were like, writing my first novel only taught me how to write that novel. And so when they wrote their second, they were like, I have to completely relearn, because it's not just that the stories are different, it's also where you are in your life as you find. I just think that's something that's not talked about enough, is just like your own circumstances of your life change so radically sometimes from book to book that there's no way you could write it the same way. You know?
Oh yeah. I've heard Garth Greenwell say that his like he felt like he was starting from scratch with the second book. Like he was like, it just was a different book, and I felt like I'd never written a book before.
That's a terrifying feeling.
Yeah.
That's why I just write the same book over and over again, and then I'm like, I'm in that wheelhouse. What about, and this is, you said you've kind of talked about it a little bit. Can you compare writing the setting for Sharp Endless Need versus Exoskeletons?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, yeah, Exoskeletons is a speculative setting. I mean, this is going to be so goofy to say, I'm not like a great world builder. Like, which is why I don't write like hard sci-fi or fantasy. It's really like literary fiction with this speculative element. So that was like the hardest part for me, was like I sort of knew generally what I wanted this world to be, and that I needed these extra shadows to like represent this source of shame and punishment. But so much of my revision was like, how do I sharpen this world? How do I sharpen like the laws of this world? And that was like the hardest part for me. Like I'm a very character driven writer. And that's like what I sort of focus on. So it was like Chris comes to life and all the problems, but it was still sort of like there are all these lingering questions about like what's happening in this world, and also like when is this world was often a question. I was like, it's just an alternate reality sometime. You know?
I wonder, no, go ahead.
No, but it's like A Sharp Endless Need. It's like I had this world, I just had to re-enter it. And maybe the more difficult thing is how do I re-enter it? How do I get back into that like psychological space, really? But otherwise I have that world sort of built, and I get to use those things, like the setting, in sort of different ways, because I already know everything about it. So it was really like reverse in a lot of ways.
I was just thinking of that, like, and I don't mean this is not a question you have to answer. I just mean as a general, like, is it harder to look back to create fiction or to look forward? Do you know what I mean? And I kind of with you is that like it may be difficult to go back to look back, but I feel solid once I get in it. And anytime I look forward, I'm always feel like I'm kind of grasping for the details that aren't quite there or that I don't feel strongly about.
Yeah.
So another question is, do you think Liv and Mack have their own personas for each other, or do you think they're both stripped of persona when they're together?
That's a really interesting question. I think they have personas for the most part, like when they're off the court. And I think it's a matter of that slowly dropping like over time, versus the way maybe sport can immediately drop, or there's an immediacy there. I think like when they're off the court and they're together, they both are pretty guarded a lot of the time. They talk in circles. That was like one of the challenges for me in writing the dialogue. And I really love dialogue. Like I love to study it and read it, and I'd like to think about it. And one of the challenges for me was, okay, how do I take these two people who are not going to say what they mean, at least for 3/4 of the book, like we start to see these things like get flipped on their head and whatnot. But how do I have them talk around things? How do I have them talk like with subtext? How do I have them, like a thing I really like is redirection, like as a psychological sort of thing and a craft thing. How can somebody who feels really looked at, really observed, how can they redirect the energy and the attention that way? Don't look at me, look over there at what those people are doing. And what that character points out tells a lot about them. And it's sort of those tricks that are fun. But yeah, I do think they have their facade and their personas sort of at play, at least for a lot of it.
That's awesome. I know we're kind of reaching the end of our time together, and I just wanted to say again, Mack, I'm just really grateful for the chance to get to talk to you and to talk about this book, and just how much of an important book it was for me when I read it, and how happy I am to see it out in the world and to be getting the response that it's getting. And I kind of just, because I know you a little bit, but maybe to close out on, like, so who do you want to win this year, WNBA wise? Who are you rooting for?
Well, thank you, number one. Like, I appreciate you so much, and for blurbing my book. And I also get word from other people when you are going around shopping my book and telling people to read it. So thank you too. Dude, I'm an Aces fan, so this year is really shitty for me. But maybe they'll find their way. Otherwise, I might like cheer for the Mercury sort of throughout the playoffs. I think they're fun this year. What about you?
I think I never really got into the WNBA until the Lady Vols were really bad, and then I was like, maybe I can watch Candace Parker a little bit and ride that to make me happy again. But the way the teams change, because there's so few teams, that the makeup can sometimes change so radically, it's sometimes hard for me to root for teams. My favorite teams are the Mystics and the Dream, and the Mystics from the get-go, but they're kind of Mystics are unrecognizable to me. So I just kind of root for good basketball, and oftentimes I root against teams, and that's, spite is so much more of a draw for me than wanting certain teams to win. It's more just like I don't want another team to win. So but I love the Aces, so I'd be happy if they could find a way to get back.
Yeah, they're having a hard time. I see more questions in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Yes.
It's not the Q&A function, but there's some questions there.
Let me switch back to or if ER has any idea, let me check.
I can answer this one.
Put it back in there, Kevin. Sorry.
Oh, thanks.
How did I decide to name Mack and do both Mack and Liv contain parts of my story? How I named Mack is really silly. My parents wanted to name me Mackenzie, and then they decided not to because they didn't want me to go by Mack, and I resented them for my whole life. And instead of just realizing that I could name myself Mack, I was like, I have to write an entire character named Mack. And And then I was like, wow, you can actually just name yourself. So that was a silly roundabout thing that I did. Do Mack and Liv contain parts of my own story? Yes. Yeah, they both do. Which is why it was dual POV, like at first, was I was sort of exploring like different parts of like my upbringing and like sort of problems. But yeah, Mack is more like all the basketball stuff, the ambition, the booze and the drugs. And Liv has that like that Catholic like religious trauma going. And my family wasn't super religious growing up, but like I was raised Catholic, and there was yeah, a lot of sort of influences there, of course, that I was like sinful and my existence is bad. So good stuff.
Get in there, Mack. What are you doing? So I see.
I know.
Oh God, this was pretty tough too. It says in both novels, grief is a silent character that often causes the main character to engage in destructive behaviors, which I love the pain of. Is there a future story where the main character doesn't have to grieve?
This is a great question. No.
Oh, Mack!
No, I'm just playing, but it's, you know, you read me. Yeah, maybe. I have a short story collection coming out next year called Perverts, and not everyone is grieving in that collection, I should say. Only a few people.
Well, I'll take what I can get, Mack. That makes me happy.
Perverts. There is a story called Topping is Not for the Grief Stricken, which is from a line that someone said at Sewanee. This guy, Joe, read an essay, and it was like, he just said at one point, like, topping is not for the grief stricken. And like everybody in the audience went crazy. We were like, that's the best line ever. So yeah, unfortunately that person's grieving, but there's a few others where they're
not. Oh man. All right. Well, I think we've hit the end of our time, and if ER wants to come back, but Mack, thanks so much. Okay. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm glad we got to hang out.
Me too.
Thank you all so much. This was so fun. Can't wait for Perverts to come out. This is the first time I'm hearing of it, but that's really exciting. Do you have a month for the pub date?
July.
All right. Well, we will look forward to that. For everybody who somehow hasn't got Run for the Hills yet, Kevin's most recent book, I'm going to put that in the chat. It's really lovely. I love that you think of yourself as a prude. You're just like heartwarming, you know, like that's how we're like, you know, you want to feel good. The world sucks. Buy Kevin Wilson's books. So, definitely, if somehow you're new to Kevin's work, please check him out. He has many, many great novels. The Family Fang is still one of so many of our customers' favorites. So thank you for all that you do in the literary world, Kevin. And Matt, congratulations. Thank you for this book. We know it's going to be kind of an enduring Charis favorite. So if you haven't bought this book yet, you can click the teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy A Sharp Endless Need from Charis. It really does help us when you buy event books from us. So thank you. If you can't do that today, it also helps authors when you request their books from the library, especially queer books, especially in the South. We really do encourage you to do that. We hear from librarians all the time that they really want us to be requesting books because people on the right are always putting what they want in the libraries, so we need to be getting the librarians' backs and requesting queer books, especially ones that might have some crossover appeal for precocious teenagers. So do that and buy your books. But thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. I hope you both stay safe and well, and that your respective teams win as much as possible.
Thank you
for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right. Bye, y'all. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Bye.